Most people think homesteading means walking away from money. It doesn't. A basic setup on land you already own starts around $10,000. A real, livable, off-grid homestead runs $50,000 to $150,000. Some go past $500,000. And that's before the first tomato plant goes in the ground. Here's the number that should scare you more. Land prices across the U.S. have jumped 77% since the pandemic started. In early 2026, the median land listing sold for over $62,000 an acre. Depending on the state, an acre can run anywhere from $1,500 to nearly $196,000. That's not a typo. That's the same country, the same asset class, 130-fold spread. 13 years ago, one Georgia homesteader started his farm with less than $1,000. Today he tells his followers online that the real starting number is $5,000, and that gets you a shed, a tarp roof, and a bucket toilet. Nothing more. Compare that to one forum poster in the rural Northeast, who paid over $500,000 for just 5 acres with an existing barn. A bigger parcel with the same features would have run past $1 million. So which is it? $5,000 or $500,000? The answer is both. And that's because homesteading isn't one purchase. It's 2 completely different financial products, wearing the same flannel shirt. Search homesteading online and you'll get 2 totally different pitches. One is a survivalist blueprint, buy cheap, build slow, owe nothing. The other is a glossy real estate listing, rolling pasture, a renovated farmhouse, a price tag that reads like a Manhattan condo. Both pitches are true. Neither one tells you which business you're actually funding. Here's the pivot. Every homestead is actually 2 separate businesses, stapled together and sold as one dream. Business 1 is the consumption purchase. This is the land, the house, the well, the solar array, the septic system. None of it makes money. All of it costs money. Every single month, whether or not you ever sell a single egg. It's a lifestyle expense wearing the branding of self-sufficiency. Business 2 is the production enterprise. This is the part that can actually generate revenue. Livestock, direct sales, agritourism, content. Most buyers pay for business 1 and just assume business 2 will show up on its own. It won't. Nobody backs into a functioning farm business by accident. Joel Salatin proves the gap, and he proves it with 3 decades of receipts. He's arguably the most famous farmer in America, once called by Time magazine the world's most innovative farmer. His family started on a Virginia farm, making around $300 a month. Today that same 950-acre operation grosses $2 million a year, supports 20 full-time salaries, and funds a paid internship program for the next generation of farmers. That gap didn't close by accident. Closed through deliberate design, enterprise by enterprise, and we're going to walk through exactly how. Notice the order of operations because it matters. Salatin didn't buy the land expecting business 2 to appear. He built business 2 on land his family already owned over decades, one small experiment at a time. Most modern homestead buyers reverse that order. They buy the biggest business, one they can afford first, on the assumption that the revenue will follow the acreage. It almost never does. Acreage doesn't generate income. Systems do. Let's run the math on business 1, because the numbers stack quickly and nobody advertises the total. Land first. A young Missouri couple paid $45,000 for 5 acres. That meant a $4,500 down payment and $357 a month on the mortgage. That's just the dirt, before a single fence post goes in the ground. Housing next. That same couple lived in a $2,500 travel trailer while they built their home from scratch. They needed a used pickup truck to tow it, since neither of their old vehicles could handle the job. $1,750. They needed a portable generator to run power tools on site. $2,300. Now the utilities, because off-grid doesn't mean free. It just means you own the infrastructure yourself, up front, in cash or in debt. A well runs $5,000 to $15,000. A basic solar power system runs $10,000 to $50,000. A septic system runs $3,000 to $7,000. Build a small, minimalist off-grid house yourself, and you're still around $45,000 just for the structure. None of these numbers include labor if you hire it out. Stack it all up. Land, shelter, power, water, waste. You're at roughly $50,000 before you've raised a single chicken, and that's the frugal version. The realistic full comfort version, according to multiple off-grid cost guides, lands between $50,000 and $150,000. And every one of those line items has been climbing hard. In Indiana, recreational land nearly doubled in a single year, from $3,876 an acre in 2020 to $7,486 in 2021. Top-quality Indiana farmland hit $9,785 an acre that same year, up 14% from 12 months earlier. Average quality land rose 12.5%. Even poor quality land climbed 12%. 5-acre rural homesteads in some regions ran $10,000 to $15,000 an acre on top of that. The homestead dream got dramatically more expensive while everyone else was watching sourdough tutorials. And location swings the whole equation wildly. In Texas, the typical rural land sale in 2020 covered 1,139 acres at just over $3,000 an acre, a scale and price point that looks nothing like a 5-acre lifestyle plot in Indiana or California. Buy in the wrong state at the wrong moment, and your affordable homestead is actually the expensive one. There's no single price for this dream. There are 50 different regional markets, all moving at different speeds, and almost none of them moving down. A buyer comparing listings across state lines is really comparing 5 or 6 unrelated markets that happen to share a currency. Here's where the story turns from expensive to exclusionary. Financing a homestead isn't like financing a house in a subdivision, because rural land doesn't behave like a normal asset. It has almost no comparable sales nearby. Appraisals lag reality by months, and the same acre can be valued 3 different ways depending on whether the buyer wants to farm it, hunt on it, or just look at it from a porch. Meet Abel Datton, 20 years old, raised on a beef farm in the Missouri Ozarks, newly married, ready to start his own operation. He had his eye on the farm right next door. Over the course of one single year, the price of that property tripled. Dowden couldn't match the new number. The owner simply held the land, waiting for a buyer with deeper pockets than a young rancher just starting out. Why did the price triple? 3 forces collided at once. Interest rates sat near historic lows, which meant land was cheap to finance for anyone with decent credit. Federal stimulus money gave rural households cash they wouldn't otherwise have had, and much of it went straight into land purchases instead of savings accounts. And city dwellers, spooked by lockdowns, started buying rural acreage as a lifestyle purchase rather than a working farm. A 2020 Harris poll found nearly 40% of urban adults would consider a rural move. Local banker Levi McDarris watched all 3 forces collide in real time, in the same Ozark towns where Dowden was trying to buy. His own clients were taking stimulus checks and pouring them directly into land, which pushed prices up for every other buyer in the county, including working farmers with no stimulus windfall to spend. The result is a 2-tier market, and Texas shows the scale of it. Rural land sales there jumped 28.9% in 2020 to 7,684 transactions. By the first quarter of 2021, sales were up another 37%, hitting $1.99 billion across 612,699 acres. West Texas alone saw a 50% surge in deal volume. By the fourth quarter of 2021, statewide rural land prices were up 29% year over year, and growth was still running at 19% a year later, in the third quarter of 2022. Nationally, land inventory has never recovered. There were 426,986 land parcels listed for sale in the first quarter of 2026, in a market where inventory has contracted 23.6% since 2019 and shows no sign of rebuilding. When interest rates finally rose after the 2021 peak, price growth cooled, but it never gave back the gains. The buyers who financed early won. The buyers financing today are paying yesterday's frenzy price at today's higher interest rate. That's the refinancing trap baked into the whole asset class. The terms improve for nobody except the people who got in first. Zoom out and the pattern gets darker. Nearly 7 million acres of farmland converted to low-density lifestyle housing between 2001 and 2016, long before the pandemic even started accelerating the trend. Every acre split into a hobby ranch is an acre a working farmer like Dowden can no longer bid on at agricultural prices. Land access has become the single biggest barrier young farmers report facing, ahead of equipment, ahead of labor, ahead of weather risk. The homestead boom and the farm access crisis are the same event, viewed from 2 different bank accounts. Say you clear the financing hurdle. The bills don't stop. They just change shape, and they get less predictable, not more, once the systems are actually installed and running every day. Off-grid monthly costs typically run $450 to $1,200. And that's after you've already paid for every system outright. That figure covers propane, generator fuel, well pump maintenance, and solar battery replacement, which usually happens every 5 to 10 years whether you're financially ready for it or not. Insurance is its own surprise expense. Rural properties routinely price higher than an equivalent suburban home because remote fire response times and unconventional construction methods spook standard carriers, and some carriers won't write a policy at all. Then there's labor, and this is the cost people underestimate the most. Fencing wears out from weather and pressure every season, without exception. Predators test coop latches nightly, every single night, for as long as you keep chickens alive. Water lines freeze in winter and clog with sediment in summer. None of this shows up in the glossy homestead photos people post online. All of it shows up in the bank account by October. Equipment doesn't hold its value either. A used tractor depreciates like any other vehicle, fast, and needs parts that get harder to find every year that passes. Greenhouse plastic needs full replacement every 3 to 5 years. Every one-time cost that homesteaders talk about online is actually a recurring cost with a longer interval between payments, dressed up to sound finished. The land was the down payment. The maintenance is the mortgage that never actually ends. Winter adds its own line item entirely. In cold regions, heating isn't a comfort upgrade. It's a safety requirement, and off-grid households usually cover it with a mix of wood, propane, and battery-backed solar that all need to run simultaneously during the worst weeks of the year. Skip any one of those systems to save money, and you're not cutting a luxury, you're cutting a safeguard. That's the part the online homestead tours never film. The 3 a.m. trip to the woodpile in -degree weather, just to keep the pipes from splitting. Now for the part that actually works, because some of it genuinely does, if you build it on purpose instead of hoping. Case 1, Stacking Enterprises, the Polyface Farm Model. Joel Salatin doesn't sell one product off 1 acre. He owns 950 acres, 700 of them forest, and leases another 1,500 acres across 15 separate properties near his home base. On that land he layers cattle, meat chickens, egg chickens, turkeys, sheep, and rabbits, each using the same ground at a different time, in a different way, for a different purpose. Pastured broilers net $1,500 an acre over 6 months. Pastured layers, run by one person working 7 hours a week on 5 acres, net $10,000 a year. Pigs rooting through compost net $3,000 an acre without a single piece of heavy machinery. A portable bandsaw mill turns fallen logs into lumber for a $400 a day profit center on the days it runs. Add it all up, and Polyface pulls roughly $3,000 an acre in total revenue, compared to $100 to $300 an acre for a conventional cow-calf operation on the exact same kind of land. The difference isn't the soil, it's the stacking. Salatin also runs the capital math backwards for most farms. Where a conventional operation needs heavy equipment and debt to scale output, Polyface needs a fraction of that capital for the same acreage, because the labor and management substitute for the machinery. He puts the saved capital into people instead of steel, 20 full-time salaries, on a farm that once supported a single struggling family. That's not a moral choice dressed up as economics. It's a straightforward substitution of one input for another, and it happens to also produce a better story for the cameras. Case 2, Cutting out the middleman entirely. 40% of Polyface revenue comes straight from restaurants, roughly 50 of them, built up one relationship at a time, starting with a single restaurant in town decades ago. Another 40% comes from a metropolitan buying club that sells directly to households, skipping the wholesale distributor completely. Salatin says his operation needs a fraction of the capital a conventional farm needs for comparable output, and reinvests the difference into paying 20 full-time staff instead of buying more machinery. That's the second lesson. Sell the product once, to the person who pays retail, not 3 times through a supply chain that takes a cut at every handoff. Case 3. Turning the land itself into the product. Airbnb reported a 1,055% jump in farm stay searches in just the first quarter of 2021, compared to the same quarter 2 years earlier. Over 19,000 farm stays were booked on the platform, adding up to 745,000 guest nights across nearly 1 million guests. The average rural host earned $8,448 through the pandemic's first year alone, over $2,000 more than hosts made before the pandemic hit. In Ballard, California, Jen Bolden converted her garage into a guest stay overlooking her goat herd at a Navajo farm, turning a small dairy operation into a diversified income stream. Another small farmer built her Airbnb rental into roughly 10% of her total household income. A homesteader in Modoc County, California, built a loyal following simply by allowing pets on her property, a policy most rural hosts skip entirely. The barn didn't change in any of these stories. The revenue model wrapped around it did. Case 4. Content, the newest and shakiest leg of the stool. YouTube requires 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours in a single year before a channel even qualifies for ad revenue. Once qualified, top-performing channels earn roughly $5 for every 1,000 views. For most farm channels, that translates into a modest $50 to $200 a month, sometimes for an entire year of filming, editing, and uploading. The real value isn't the ad check. It's the audience that later buys eggs, books a workshop, or reserves a seat at the farm stand months down the line. Content rarely pays the mortgage by itself. It pays for the marketing that lets the other 3 businesses find customers who would never have found the farm otherwise. There's a warning buried inside case for that applies to the whole chapter. Homestead YouTube channels tend to show the romantic 10-second clips, tilling a field, fixing a fence, holding a lamb. What they rarely show is the labor arbitrage underneath a genuinely profitable farm, the unpaid interns, the extended family working for room and board, the fact that most successful self-sufficient channels are actually small businesses selling a course or a community, not the vegetables on screen. That's not a scandal. It's just the same lesson as everything else in this script. The visible product is rarely the actual revenue driver. Line these 4 cases up, and a pattern appears. None of them monetize the land directly. Holyface monetizes management. The restaurant network monetizes relationships. The Airbnb hosts monetize the story visitors want to be part of. The YouTube channels monetize attention, badly on their own, well when redirected elsewhere. In every winning case, the actual product is a system layered on top of the dirt, not the dirt itself. Walk back through everything we've covered. Land that costs anywhere from $1,500 to $196,000 an acre. Systems that add another $50,000 to $150,000 before the first harvest. A financing market where a 20-year-old rancher gets outbid by a retiree with a stimulus check. Monthly bills that never actually stop once the loan is paid off. And on the other side of the ledger, for genuinely different ways to make the land pay you back. Stacking enterprises, cutting out the middleman, selling the story instead of just the product, and using content as marketing rather than income. A homestead isn't a purchase. It's 2 businesses sharing one deed. One that spends your money every single month, and one that might, if you design it on purpose, spend other people's money instead. If you're ready to farm, build a business plan alongside the barn. If you just want the view, that's fine too. Just stop calling the mortgage a harvest.